I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Friday, January 16th, 2026, and what a raucous, rollicking beginning of the new year. I am just overwhelmed by what's happening in our country and in our community. In our country, I mean the direction and leadership that I think is bad leadership of Donald Trump and his effort to reinstate the sense of manifest destiny, what I call imperialism or neocolonialism, meddling in the affairs of sovereign nations, both in South America, particularly the invasion of Venezuela and the abduction of its president and first lady, and also the saber rattling around the rest of the Caribbean, Mexico in particular, the agitation around Greenland, annexing Greenland, the destabilization of our relationships with NATO by discounting the value of the strategic partnership that we've had since World War II, particularly with the NATO North American Treaty Alliance Treaty Organization. All of that on the table at risk, and to what end? And I fear that in part it's theater designed to obfuscate, to shield, to hide, to move our attention away from the rotten at its core leadership of our country and their sense of rallying the worst instincts in human beings and in Americans for the sake of the preservation and elevation of what I call white supremacist thought. Well, I'll talk more about that later on today. Today is Friday. We have, as regular, as usual, our healing circle, and pleased to be joined by a colleague and elder and leader, Dr. Oliver Williams. Dr. Williams, before this show is over today, we've got a special guest talking about aging and dementia. We're focusing on that, and it's an important issue. And before we started, I asked our guest if she was comfortable also pivoting to talk about world affairs and community affairs, and particularly, I'm engrossed in understanding the presence and the movement and the harm being created by ICE right here in Minnesota. But I'm also heartened, excited by the resistance from our governor, the mayors of both cities, and our congressional members, all rallying to protect the sovereignty and the dignity of the people of Minnesota. And so I was saying to our guests coming up, if you're comfortable, hang out with us, because we want to invite the public to join the conversation on the chat, on any of the channels that we're on. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you were around yesterday, we had a significant amount of engagement, people following. The chat was on fire, as they said. So we want to do that again today. Let's get people to weigh in on this issue of ICE's presence in Minnesota and in other cities around the country. And I've been listening this morning to hearings going on right now as we speak over at the state capitol. There is a field hearing by members of Congress that is meeting here at the invitation of our Representative Ilhan Omar. So we might be able to drop in and catch a little bit of that in the course of the day. Before I go, though, Dr. Oliver, let me just invite listeners and to send a note out to their friends and colleagues saying we're on the air, we're live, and we want to invite them to join the presentation. So there it is. And as we're talking, I'll be working on the side to generate notes on this conversation as well to my Messenger and YouTube and other social media platforms. So there we go. Dr. Oliver, how you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there, Brother Al. It's been interesting watching the things that have been going on. My son has been going to the protests. And so, and I said, don't go without me. I want to worry about his well-being. But at the same time, I appreciate his commitment for justice. And so I got to support him in that regard. but I think that's one of the things that's interesting. It sort of reminds me of as a young man, seeing the protest and how people responded to dealing with injustice in its different forms.
Mhm.
And it's been interesting having people from a younger generation that weren't around when those things were happening, stand up and protest because they see wrong as wrong and they want to confront it. And I'm in the same space. And I thought that with some of the things, I wouldn't see it the way that it is, and it has been, I guess, for a bit since the person in the White House has been reelected. But it's been challenging for me to be able to see him and to go much further in terms of the degree of his racism and disregard for our allies and our support and nationally as well as internationally. Doesn't make sense, but we know he's a puppet of Putin, and
Mhm.
but there's some foolishness is going on beyond that too, and I think calling it out is something that's important for us to be able to do and deal with. So I just had a range of emotions associated with um, what we're dealing with in this country. So,
Let's talk about that for a minute. What is the range of emotions? What are you feeling and thinking?
well, on the one hand, feeling as I have with regard to the Twin Cities, when George Floyd was killed, and even before George Floyd, but when George Floyd was killed, seeing people's reaction to it and seeing the diversity of people reacting to the injustice,
Mhm.
but also, watching things happening currently is the range of people who are out protesting, young, old, black, white, Asian, Native American, Latino. It's been it's inspiring me. The other thing I appreciate is Keith Ellison,
Mhm.
and to see him and the governor and people who are many of the people who are representatives, particularly Democrats,
Mhm.
stand up to this foolishness. Is disappointing to me about Republicans that are going along with his foolishness and some trying to justify it. The Republican Congress person here is very disappointing to me. And but he has been for a while. But it's been interesting seeing some Republicans peel off and recognize that what Trump is doing isn't good for the country. And to me, one of the things he's trying to do, I believe, is bankrupt the country.
Hmm.
And I don't know whether he's doing it. I know he's trying to enrich himself. What's interesting to me is the emoluments clause, that is put in place for public officials not to take advantage of and getting rich off of foolishness that's happening in terms of having people try to find favor with them or to and I don't understand why they gave him immunity. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But there's got to be some way to be able to deal with that and to take it away. And the other thing is, there's got to be some way to be able to get his co-conspirators too to um, have some consequence associated with their behaviors. So those are things that I've been thinking, and I just wish things could go a little quicker
Mhm.
than they have been. I know it's important to be patient and that these things take time, and you want to cross the T's and dot the I's, but I wish that we could be more immediate in terms of our responses. So
let's bring our guest in. She's been patient, and we thank her for being here. Debbie Richman. Debbie, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane, to the Healing Circle. Why don't you introduce yourself, first of all, in your work in the area of care, dementia care?
So my name, again, is Debbie Richman, and I have worked in healthcare related to dementia for longer than I'd like to admit, but a number of years. And since September of last year, I started working for a company called Start Senior Solutions to utilize my background and experience to help connect older adults in the community to the resources that they need to get support in a caregiving role or being taken care of. So it could be related to the caregiver, or it could be related to the person that needs care themselves. It's a role that allows me to be in the community and interact with people in the community, listening to their stories and helping them access the support and resources they need to feel comfortable in their aging, hopefully staying in their home, but if not, helping connect them to alternate housing resources, just a lot of connectivity with the community. One of the beauties of our organization is these services are free. So anyone that contacts us, anyone, whether it's a phone call or a visit or 3 months of work, there's no charge for the services. We consider the services a ministry to the community. And so that's how we focus the work.
And to be an elder advocate, what are the objectives? What are the aims?
To make aging a little bit easier. Growing old, as I'm learning, and perhaps you both are learning as well, can be wrought with challenges. Most of us, myself included, I think, don't think about what's going to happen when we reach a certain age. And if that age also comes with an illness or a challenging situation or not a lot of family support or not a lot of financial resources, our organization and my work really try to help people overcome those so they can truly live their best life as they get older. A lot of what I did in healthcare when I was in healthcare management was very similar work, just from the inside out. Now I'm on the outside of these situations, but I have the experience of working in long-term care and in assisted living and for large nonprofit organizations. So I understand the rules and regulations, but I also understand the rights of the people receiving care, the rights of people to access care and resources. And I intentionally put myself in the middle of those conversations to make sure that what needs to happen and what people are entitled to does happen. So really trying to help eliminate those barriers. And there are a few.
Let me share a little bit about your work. May I call you Debbie?
You may.
So you've worked over 30 years with older adults in various settings, including long-term care, assisted and independent living, memory care, and community. And your areas of expertise relate to dementia, both for the person living with and the person's caregiving. You've done presentations across the country for both professionals and caregivers. Your current role as the elder advocate for Start Senior Solutions focuses on families struggling with dementia diagnoses and providing support so they get to the needed resources. And, as you just said, one of the challenges relates to dementia care management, things like behavior, like housing, like activities of daily living. How do you do person-centered care? So let me drop 3 general questions. You can flow as you will, and Dr. Oliver, jump in when you want to as well. What does being equipped to be a caregiver really mean, and how does someone tell if they're approaching the caregiver role with unrealistic expectations? That's question number 1. And 2, caregiving can and likely will take over every corner of a person's life. So how can someone tell if the role is starting to affect their health, their sleep, their spirit before they burn out? That's for the caregiver. And then finally, what are the cultural aspects of this? Cultural expectations to be a caregiver can be overwhelming. And how do you navigate the sense of duty while taking care of yourself? You know, and I say that I grew up in families in Kansas City where I witnessed, I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, but an aunt or great aunt, my grandmother's sister, who was dementia. Back in those days, it's like in the 50s, 1950s, we just called her Aunt Della, and we said she was crazy, right? They had her under lock and key in a room in our house. And, you know, they brought food into her, and then there'd be all kinds of just mayhem and mess in her room. She was actually, you know, I don't know how you describe it. I just remember it from the eyes of a 5, 6-year-old kid. And I remember her being brought out of the room on one occasion and rocking in a rocking chair under supervision, but she rocked out and died. So my grandmother was her sister, I guess, or her niece was the caregiver. The family was a caregiver who were all in that house with her. And then since that time, I've witnessed several other people in my family experience dementia. My own mother died just recently, having lived to 92, but with dementia, maybe 99 with dementia, and had uncles and aunts and other people. And so I'm concerned about, number one, my obligations as a caregiver relative, but I'm also concerned about my own health. What's going to happen to you, Alan McFarlane, because you're getting old, boy, and you're forgetting stuff a lot. So how does a person like me, Dr. Williams, and our guest, Debbie, approach this in a way that keeps us grounded and having reasonable expectations? What do you think? Big question, sorry.
Yeah. How much time is there left? No. I think, you know, you start with the question about being equipped, and no one is ever fully equipped to accept the role of being a caregiver. It sort of sneaks up on you. It can be something that you think might happen. My mother passed away a little over 5 years ago, and I was put into the caregiving role pretty full-time the day she went into the hospital and never went home again, although that role has evolved over the last 5+ years. There's not a manual. And boy, I wish there was sometimes. I think as a professional, and maybe Dr. Williams, you can relate to this as well. You know, I talk to people a lot about the caregiving journey and things that they can do to make that caregiving journey a little bit less stressful. When you, though, are the caregiver, it's a different journey because now you have to take your own advice. And I don't know about you, but I'm not always the best example of taking my own advice or listening to the same information that I tell families. I think being equipped to be a caregiver, you know, if you have aging parents, and for the purposes of discussion, let's just talk about over the age of 80. That's just a random age. Thinking about these things at a very rudimentary level before there's a crisis is very critical. And what I mean by that is there a power of attorney? Have you talked about a will? Have you talked about a health care directive? Have you talked about, does the person want to stay at home, or are they open to alternative living arrangements if that becomes necessary? And with that one in particular, there can be a pretty large cultural conversation that happens in terms of whether or not that's an accepted practice of having, having someone go someplace or put somewhere. Al, what you talk about in terms of individuals being locked in a room, I wish that didn't happen still, but there are scenarios that I'm familiar with from my experience that, when people don't understand what's happening and they identify that individual as crazy, or they'll use the word senile, which is an old school word. And the best way for them to deal with it in that situation is to have that person not visible, but they're still there. They're still very present. And we don't, I think as a country, we don't think about growing older or getting older as having inherent consequences. something will happen to us. It's a question of what and when it's going to occur, and we never know. It's sort of a gamble as to how well you can predict. With dementia, a lot of that depends on the type of dementia. There's a lot of them. Alzheimer's disease is the one we hear about the most, but there's a lot of other types. And when you talk about forgetting as we get older, I will say that I'm 63. A lot of forgetting is caused by too many things going on in your head at the same time and trying to keep track of all that information. Al, when you were speaking earlier, and I was trying to count how many different things you're thinking about just in the context of an hour. It's not a big surprise if something gets missed.
Mm-hmm.
But the key difference is when whatever that is resurfaces, do you remember why you wanted to talk about it in the first place? Yes, I'm sure you will, which means it's not a disease type of forgetfulness or memory loss. It's just what's happening in the world. And to what's going to happen in the second half of the show, there's a tremendous amount of stuff, stress going on outside all of our walls right now. And certainly this is not helping caregivers. And it's giving everything and everyone a lot of challenge. But caregiving in particular, I can only imagine the added stress on individuals in the community that are struggling already to maintain a positive caregiving environment.
Yeah, among the things that I think about is in terms of preparing for it. My sister and I took up guardianship. We were co-guardians of my mom when she got to a certain age, and my sister, who recently passed away, she ended up taking my mom into her home. Now, my mom passed away in 2005, and so my sister and I really spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to respond to my mom. And as she got older, the dementia increased.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain things that she would deal with, some of which were kind of funny, but some of which were challenges. And I think one of the things I think about is my mother being at a place where her mobility was difficult, and my sister couldn't manage that. And so we talked about putting my mom into a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
And as she went into the nursing home, we had to talk about the economics associated with that. So my mother couldn't manage the stairs. And even in her house, but also in my sister's house. And my mother, we went to visit her in Detroit. So when I went to visit her, I went into a room, and she said, and there was a Dracula movie on. And so she asked me to whisper because she didn't want the people on TV, or Dracula to recognize that we were there, because she was a little concerned. Another time that we talked, I would call her on the phone, and when she stopped being able to really have relevant conversations with me, she was thinking she was in her room, but she was saying that something was going on, and something that was going on at my uncle's house. But my uncle had passed away, and he didn't, and my aunt, his wife, didn't live in the same place that she was describing. And so she also had the belief that she was on the phone with him, but that wasn't true. So when these things started to occur, and her having conversations, she had her own phone, but she was describing things that sounded like she was in a different place. And so I had to call my sister and ask her where my mom was, and finding out that my mom was upstairs in the room that my sister, had set up for her. And so we realized that my mom was deteriorating over a period of time. And my sister and I had to deal with the guilt of, placing my mom in another space, because my sister didn't have the capacity to deal with it. And then we had to deal with the economics of it. And so, you at least in back in 2003 and 2004, you didn't have to worry about the healthcare system in the same way you do now.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of resources to care for a person and in a particular facility. And what I would come up with when I would go to events, like somebody would have a dinner at their house, and they took their aged parent with them, and they seemed like they were so elegant in the way that they treated their family member. They're so loving and caring. And so it's, to me, it was their demonstration about how much they loved their parent or loved one. And, I felt some sort of level of guilt because, I didn't bring my mom to Minnesota, but the other side of it was that my mother had friends, a lot of friends, and a lot of family that would go visit her on a regular basis, both at my sister's house, but also in the nursing home. It was difficult to be able to see my mom transition to a space where people didn't understand her life experience and the quality person that she was, because she was always a very helpful and loving person and a woman in the church. And a lot of people from church would come and visit my mom. So, dealing with those emotional transitions, dealing with the economics of, caring for a person, trying to figure out how you can still care for someone. When I would visit my mom when she was in the nursing home, I would take her out, and we enjoyed ourselves when we go out. But I also remember a comment she made that always stuck with me, and it was, "Am I dreaming?" So when we go out and we go to places, so I don't know, you're not familiar with Detroit, there's a place called Belle Isle, and it's an island in between Michigan and Canada.
Okay.
And so we'd go around there, and then we'd stop and get a shake or a soda. And she enjoyed it, 'cause that's one of the things I knew she enjoyed. But then she would stop and say, as we're riding around, was she dreaming? And those comments sort of stick with you, but trying to figure out how you can still love the person and care for her. I'd give her a bath when she was in the nursing home, and after I would give her a bath, then she would say, "Well, I need you to give me a bath." So Ma just did that, and her not recognizing that it just happened. And so, dealing with the loss of the person that you knew, to someone who was dealing with challenges, and then getting to a place where you couldn't communicate with her anymore, and then the loss of that connection. I couldn't call her on the phone and have conversations with her like I used to. So those losses are interesting things, but also navigating the system is another thing, trying to find the support. So Debbie, it would be interesting to me to for you to talk about what those supports are within the system as a person starts to go through dementia, and the challenges of staying home, but also the challenges of moving into another facility to be able to support them.
So, Dr. Williams, there's a couple of things you said that I feel like I have to respond to first.
Yeah. Okay.
One is about you made a comment about guilt, which is, of course, always in 5 capital letters, and it ebbs and flows. But you talked about not bringing her to Minnesota. But then you talked about the people that came to visit her where she was, whether that was with your sister or when she had to move into the nursing home, and the connectivity to the church and the church community. I would say, instead of thinking about that experience as coming with guilt, you gave her a gift.
Yeah.
You certainly could have moved her to Minnesota. I don't imagine there was anything preventing you from doing that. But all of those components you talked about that focused on her, and most importantly, who she was, people that knew her. If I would have met her, you could have given me the Reader's Digest version, but I don't have the history. These were people that could visit her and interact with her, that had the history and could connect to her in ways that people up here would not have had the capability to do. So it's a gift being able to do that. And then obviously you had to figure out how to navigate that, and not having the ability to go every day or every other day. It was very intentional, I'm guessing, when you went to see her.
Yeah.
But then you did things, talking about going on a drive and having a milkshake. And my guess, it was a particular flavor of milkshake. Things that connected her not only to you, but her past. And those are the things that dementia doesn't take away, at least not right away. And sometimes never. Sometimes even though they can't respond to you verbally, and I've seen this more times than I can tell you, having someone be able to hear, because they always hear, you tell them a family story or something that you remember fondly, and they react. Their eyes open, they turn toward the sound. Again, it's that connectivity. And this is where we start talking about person-centered care.
Yeah.
What does it mean to take care of the person? Thinking about resources, Start can give a lot of resources. I also have a filter that I have to use, where if the person, I just met with a woman who's 96 years old from Michigan. Her daughter lives here. The daughter wants her to move here. Mom ain't ready. And in my work, I have to listen to that.
Yeah.
Just because the daughter wants her, it's going to be easier for the daughter, no question. It probably would have been easier for you, but it's not easier for her. Her friends are there, her community's there. She's very active in her church. And I got the sweetest email from her after we met that she did not copy her daughter on. And I'm pretty sure that was on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
To thank me for the conversation that we had. We talked a lot about what made her her. And when dementia appears, that is probably the most important piece of the entire process, is focusing on the person, no matter what. Whether you're adding resources, changing resources, whether you have to move the person, focusing on the person. Who are they? What's important? What do they value? Certainly what they like, what kind of food do they like? That kind of stuff. Yes, it's important. I want to know what you value. What is important? Your mom's church was important to her. That's huge. That's a significant piece of what makes someone who they are. From the time she was a little girl, I'm guessing, she went to church. And it wasn't an optional activity, I'll bet. You went to church on Sundays and whenever else you were told to go. That was the norm. That was the expectation. What has been important to her in her life, about her family, if there was a career, that is such a fundamental piece of care that when I talk to a family, I ask those questions. Sometimes people that call don't even tell us. I had this happen yesterday, didn't even tell me their mother's name. I had to ask, can you tell me your mom's name? I need to know something. I need to feel like I'm talking about a real live human.
Yeah.
And not just a 62-year-old or however old the person is. There has to be a connectivity, even with me. The resources are the easy part of my job. The right resources in the right situation sometimes make things a little tougher, but I know how to navigate the system. And so I can take all of that stress away, and it may take me a day or two, but I can connect people to the resources that are best suited for them in their situation. It may be disease, it may be cultural, it may be neighborhood, it might be somebody that's moving back to where they grew up. Sometimes people come here, sometimes they go the other way too, and talking about it all, because that in and of itself, I think, is a huge resource for people, just to have someone to talk to that's not going to question, not going to invalidate, but encourage them to talk more. Why do you feel that way? Why is this important? Because to tell me it's important is one thing. Explaining the reason is another layer of understanding that helps me just do my job better.
Yeah.
I also want to just quickly comment. Sometimes people, particularly with advancing dementia, say things that you don't know how to respond. You knew very well where your mother was, but your mother was giving you a very different story. The movie Dracula, let me just say that wasn't the best choice of film. But sometimes I remember a situation where I worked at a long-term care facility, and there was a woman who was adamant that there was a man coming in her room every night. Every night. We put in cameras, we investigated, we made sure there were no male caregivers. No, if there was maintenance, we took what had to be fixed out. We didn't intentionally have men in her room. She continued to say there was a man in her room every night. We figured out who the man was, Dan Rather,
Right.
on the CBS Evening News.
Right.
He was a man. He was in her room. She didn't understand that he was on television.
Right.
Because at that point, she had difficulty understanding what a television was.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are things that with a family, communication can be tricky. And a lot of communication is based on validation, trying to figure out why they're saying what they're saying, rather than, Mom, there's no man in your room.
Right.
We can see on the camera there's no man, and that doesn't matter to her.
Right.
Because there is a man in her room. You just haven't figured out who it is yet.
That's right.
So and we could talk much longer on all of these things, but I hope you know that what you did for your mom was truly a gift in letting her be connected to the people that could stay connected with her. Mm-hmm. And that when you did see her, you spent that time with quality, doing things that maintained that connection as a mother and a son.
Yeah.
And that's enormous. And I hope you can let that stay with you a little bit.
I managed to. I realized that if I had brought my mom here, really the three people that would have gone to visit her would have been my son and my wife and me. And
that's a lot.
It's a lot, but
big job.
In Detroit, man, she had all of her church sisters and other mothers of the church, and but then all my cousins. My mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family had a bunch of people, but my mom's side of the family had an enormous group of people that loved her, and cousins, and my mom was the youngest, so much of her older siblings had passed away. So, but their children and other cousins and members of the community would go visit my mom on a regular basis. They just loved her, and I knew that if we brought her here, she'd lose a lot of that. And I've also felt like it helped her stay connected to the community to some extent.
Well, and I'm
So,
sure you've heard the phrase, it takes a village.
oh yeah,
She had a village.
yeah,
She
absolutely.
was very lucky, and not a lot of people have a village, or if there is a village, the village doesn't always want to participate.
Right.
The village wants to know what's going on, but
Yeah.
they don't want to take that step to get involved.
Yeah.
So it's really a heartwarming story, and talking about that village and that support, not only for her, but for you, knowing people were seeing her and interacting, and in essence, being caregivers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was also something that, I loved my sister quite a bit, but among the things that I thought was the fact that we shared that experience together. And that's something that I think brought us, we were close before, but, brought us close together as we went through, and then we go to court, because we'd have to go to court as guardians of my mom. And then to talk about the care that she got. My mom was she had problems with her hips, both, and she was afraid to have the surgery. But when I became co-guardian, we had her have the surgery, and then her pain went away.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, when people start to lose their memory about things, some of my brothers and sisters have passed away, but she wanted to know where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to continually try to remind her that they had passed away, and I'm trying to talk to my relatives and say, don't keep forcing that on her, because you'll tell her, then she'll forget again. And every time you tell her and she becomes aware of it, she's reliving the pain of the loss again.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
When things like that happen, and oftentimes a way to make that less distressing for the person that's asking the question is giving a different answer. You really had a good relationship with Bill or whoever the person is, and we were, we're such a close family, and sort of talking about the memory and talking about the person, but not talking about the trauma. Right. Because in this case, and you just said this, it doesn't stick. Mm-hmm. It becomes recent memory, like it happened 5 minutes ago.
Exactly.
And so then they go through that over and over and over again. And depending on the resource you look at, we call it therapeutic lying or therapeutic fibbing. You can call it whatever you want. Some people have a really hard time with it because you shouldn't lie to your mother. It's not lying with intent to harm. It's creating a dialogue that's not going to cause her distress. So it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
Where you can have a conversation about the person and talk about memories, because the beauty of short-term memory, frequently, not always, is that you can very easily redirect them in a more present conversation, and they lose that question.
Right.
That question goes away. Can't guarantee it's not going to come back, right, or that it won't come back with a different person. Right. But then if everybody's consistently responding in that way, they don't have to relive that moment. And frankly, nor does the person she's asking.
That's right.
Because that's a difficult, and it's common. If there's the loss of a spouse or a loss of a child or whoever it is, that's not an uncommon situation that occurs, but there are ways to work around that. And I think, I know that we're going to pivot here in a minute, but I think one of the most significant resources a caregiving family can access is education. Wherever you can get it, and whoever is willing to talk to you about it. The internet can be a blessing and a curse, but it's a place to start. Again, resources we can give are other associations or organizations where you can talk to somebody about what's happening, the situation, not just as the caregiver, but understanding the process. Mm-hmm. What's the disease, what to expect. there's always likely things that occur, but everybody's an individual. So there's not a manual or a specific roadmap. If you're caring for somebody with dementia, here's what's going to happen. It doesn't work that way. But there are resources to at least educate people about some of the broad symptoms that go along with these diagnoses, when for sure to contact a medical professional, what might be some of those significant catalysts, so that the day-to-day things become more routine and less concerning, and you can more easily identify something that is maybe a more significant symptom, to avoid having something happen that's catastrophic, which is what we don't want to have happen, where they end up in the hospital and then things can go from bad to worse incredibly quickly.
Yeah. One of the things that my cousin said, and she did it with regard to my aunt, was that, and this may be morbid to some, but I thought it was good advice. She said to my sister and I that what you should do is plan the funeral beforehand. She said, because if you don't, trying to plan it as it happens causes a lot of grief.
That kind of goes back to, becoming equipped. When we talk about advanced care planning, that's always something I will talk to a family about. With my mom, we weren't planning on her getting a terminal cancer diagnosis and dying 2.5 months later. But I can tell you that with my father, who is now 92, everything's planned.
Yeah.
Because you're exactly right. In the moment, you're not equipped to do it, because there's too many things happening, not the least of which is the emotion.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's morbid at all. I would go again saying it's a gift to yourself. It's a gift to your family to have all of that stuff. And to the extent that the person can help, maybe what's a favorite hymn or what's a favorite reading that you can engage them in that discussion too. And that's also a lovely way to make that less of a negative interaction and really more positive.
Yeah. It's interesting that my mom had some ideas about what she wanted with regard to her passing. But another thing that was interesting was that my sister ended up planning out her funeral. So my nephew and niece ended up basically taking her directives in terms of what she wanted with regard to her funeral, which I thought was really interesting. So my wife and I are talking about it and trying to put it in place for us, or at least for me. I'm expecting to go before she does, but we'll see.
It's a great thing to do. And I have things that I've already pulled, readings that I would like, and I'm a musician on the side. And so things that I would like to have musically, it's a great thing. Yeah. And it's a great way to maintain some control, even when you don't have any.
That's right.
So
interesting, Debbie. What music do you do? What do you play or sing, or what's your musical?
So when I was in college, I was a vocal performance in piano minor with a music therapy degree, and I sing professionally with the Minnesota Chorale here in the Twin Cities. So we perform a lot with the Minnesota Orchestra.
Nice.
So what does music do in the lives of people that are experiencing dementia or growing old? And I raised that question for two reasons. One is that I remember interviewing my friends over at the music center in St. Paul. What's the name of it?
The Walker?
Oh, not McFarlane.
Walker West.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've got a musical choral group for seniors. And apparently it's just wonderful. I just read about them. I haven't seen it myself, but what I've heard about it has been a way to keep people engaged around something joyful. And then how it touches me personally is that when I used to call my mom up, she had kind of a regular loop that she would describe and talk. And I got that. And my thought was, go with the flow. And what we ended up doing, because we were raised in a Pentecostal family growing up, and we spent I can't tell you how many hours and days I spent in church, but I know all the songs and all the stories and all the Bible, stories. And so it was easy for me and comforting for me to refer to the songs that I grew up on. So I would just start saying the lyrics of the songs as words I'm talking, and she would click right in, and we would just build on, the song "Joy Bells" ringing in my heart, "Joy Bells" ringing in my heart. Songs like "I'm a Soldier in the Army of the Lord," and we'd have song after song after song that we could go to, and those songs really expressed an experience that connected both of us to how those songs showed up in our day-to-day life, in our history of being alive. So it was a wonderful thing to be able to rely on both musical and the memory of the religious training and expression that we experienced, that I experienced as a child growing up and with my mom and dad and grands, et cetera. So that's why I raised the question about music and things like music that keep us connected. What do you think?
Yeah, music is one of those things that even with a dementia diagnosis lives in a different part of the brain. So it tends to never go away. And the further back the music, the higher the likelihood that they're going to remember it. And particularly church music, where I, very early in my career, I worked with a woman who I was told didn't speak, didn't engage at all. And I had a tiny little keyboard that I would set on a table. This was in a nursing home on an Alzheimer's unit. And I would play hymns. And I grew up Lutheran, and I learned very quickly in this field that even though Lutherans basically get taught that Lutheran music is the center of the universe, I had a very quick education that, whoa, not so much. There's a whole lot of other stuff out there, and I had to learn because in this particular care facility, there probably were 10 different faiths. And so I had to find hymnals and I had to learn music. In this case, I played Amazing Grace and I heard something. And I thought, am I humming to myself? Was that, it was this woman who didn't speak, but boy, did she know Amazing Grace and every word. It lives in a different space. And so sometimes it's word leading. So Al, like you talk about just saying the lyric or the words to a hymn, the older the hymn, the better. I found that as I was more into my career, if I would do a music activity, I had to stay backwards. I couldn't, things that were changed and words that were changed to be more appropriate, I guess, as they would say, didn't fly. It had to stay old school, had to be in the red letter Bible. Which some people don't even know, and it just lives in a different space. And thinking again about how do you connect and that person-centered focus. Al, if I'm ever a caregiver for you, now I know 2 really important things. And that becomes, again, part of that bigger caregiving conversation. And music is a great thing. I cannot think of the name of the chorus in St. Paul. It'll come to me at 3 a.m. But I also direct a Giving Voice chorus called Giving Voice Crosstown. And Giving Voice Initiative is choruses across the United States that focus on individuals living with dementia and care partners or volunteers that sing with them. So once a week, I direct a chorus that's probably about 60-40, 60% people living with various types of dementia. And music, even if they're not as familiar, they learn music. They can learn melody. Do they sing the right words? Not all the time. I don't care. That's not part of it. It's being able to experience joy in a safe space where they can be whoever they are in that moment, do whatever they need to do in that moment. And the connecting thread is the music that we make.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very important.
How do people reach you? I did put the information on the screen there. So if they want to connect with Debbie Richman, elder advocate and dementia care specialist at Start Senior Solutions, there's the email, there's the website, and also the email address, Debbie at Start Senior Solutions should be .org. It's OR, but it should be ORG. people reach out to Debbie and share with her your concerns or interests and get the resources that she's able to connect you to. Let me spend the last few minutes shifting a little bit, and I'm going to go over time. I don't know if my producer is there. I think he's in an airport. He might or might not be able to stay with us for the end of the program, Jared, but I'm going to keep growing a little bit because I do want to, as I promised, focus on the issue of ICE and find the connection between what we're talking about. One thing I was thinking as you talked about music and going back to the older the better, this was like a real stretch, so bear with me. I was listening to Laurie Daniels' Favor on Sirius Radio this morning, and she was talking to a political analyst about meaning making, and his challenge on today's show was that the Democrats, the government, ought to use ICE as a focal point for the elections coming up. That we are able to and should be able to rally the voters' civic engagement by focusing on all of the atrocities that ICE is committing in a sense that disregard the Constitution, the principles of equity, justice, the law itself. They're bending the law, ignoring the law, acting as though they are above the law, and that they are presenting themselves both unqualified and misdirected, but believing and following their leader, who is taking them in a place that is not what we believe represents the best of humanity, certainly the principles of America. So right now there is and so the point I was going to make there was that going back to the oldest song, and one of the things that I'm doing, this was the stretch, is studying Metu Neter, which is ancient Egyptian language.
Oh,
And when you said that, I said, yeah, go back not just to the songs I learned when I was 5, but the songs that were created 5,000 years ago, 8, 9, 10,000 years ago, that came out of the people that I'm a part of right now, African people. I'm an African man, and I'm a descendant of the creation, the creator, the original human being. And so that original human lives in me, and I'm simply the latest iteration, as you are, and as Dr. Williams, as we all are. But to recognize that and claim that and do a reset on what it means to be the best human being we can be, that's the order of the day. And that really is front and center in the discussion that is happening around the country right now, certainly in the community. The hearings that I talked about earlier, there's a hearing going on right now in St. Paul with members of Congress. I just lost it on my phone here, but I'll share with you in a second. Trying to understand and take testimony from Minnesotans about what's happening here in Minnesota. And let's see if I can pull up a little bit of it. I'll read a part of a story that is a draft right now that I'm writing for Insight News. And it says that this was a political reckoning that several lawmakers directly blamed President Donald Trump for policies they say encourage heavy-handed enforcement and normalizing the suspension of civil liberties. So this hearing is being conducted by members of the Democratic Party, ranking member Pramila Jayapal, and also our own Ilhan Omar. And they're talking about, and they're saying that what's going on now is about who we are as a country. That's what's at stake. Who are we? And so they're saying that restoring trust requires accountability, transparency, and a recommitment to constitutional rights. And they say that right now communities are living in fear. The stakes on the table now are immediately and deeply personal. For the nation, lawmakers are warning the stakes are nothing less than the preservation of democratic values themselves. And so as you watch what's unfolding with ICE here in Minnesota and the community's reaction to it, the reaction to the death of Renee Good, and now 2 other people shot, 3 others shot in North Minneapolis in the past couple of days, what are you feeling and what are you hearing in your circles, both Debbie and Dr. Oliver? What do you think?
Debbie, you want to go first?
Sure. The first word that came to my mind when you were talking was it's sickening. what's happening. I live in a suburb, but my father grew up in North Minneapolis. My father is Jewish. And I have seen posts and I've listened to people talk about very unfortunate similarities with Nazi Germany.
Mm.
I have never ever felt afraid to be anywhere in the Twin Cities area. I traveled a lot to Chicago in a previous job. Never felt fear like I fear now going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And ICE has been present in my little suburb as well, in places that I don't understand. It confuses me a little bit. I don't understand why they're here. I don't understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, the intent to generate fear and make people scared to do even basic needs being met, where people are afraid to leave their homes. Connecting it a little bit to the caregiving world, I wonder about people who have caregivers who are Somali, who are Asian, who are Hispanic, who are anything. Are they comfortable going to work? Can they go take care of the people they normally would take care of? Or are they in fear of that? And are there protections being put in place for those folks to still be able to do their jobs? The whole thing is uncomfortable to me. And I don't even know what else to say. I guess it's very sad. I've lived here my entire life, and I've never seen or been a part of anything like this.
In this hearing going on right now, I'm reading from the draft story that we're putting together for Insight News. And before I read that, I want to invite anybody listening to share this conversation, to let people know we're talking about this important and critical matter, and to join the conversation. And as the screen shows, there's a QR code. If you want to join the conversation, click on the code. I'll let you in and share your point of view. You can agree with me or not. I respect however you feel, however you approach community culture and the society. And to me, that's the important thing, that all of us have voices that matter. But the article we're writing says lawmakers are highlighting conditions in Minnesota where reports indicate that parents are afraid to send their children to school, workers avoid jobs, and families retreat from daily life. The fear, they're saying, is not confined, however, to one state. Similar anxieties are surfacing in Phoenix, where community leaders have described neighborhoods falling silent. From a public safety perspective, the consequences are profound. And one of the persons testifying was a suburban police chief, McCarthy, who told lawmakers that such fear decimates the trust between communities and law enforcement. When residents are afraid, victims and witnesses stop coming forward. The only ones who benefit, McCarthy warned, are the criminals who prey upon the most vulnerable. So that's kind of what's at stake here. This hearing, as I said, is being led by the Democratic members of the U.S. House of Representatives, and the co-hosts are Representative Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota, and Representative Pramila Jayapal, a Democrat from Washington State. And they're saying about 30 Democrats have come to Minnesota to be part of this hearing. It's called a field hearing. I don't have the full list of the people, but I'll get that later on. But the hearing included testimony by Keith Ellison, Minnesota's Attorney General, who said and testified about the state and the city's lawsuit against federal government over the ICE actions. The testimony included testimony from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, and he talked about the impact, local impacts of federal enforcement, and also testifying Carly Herr, the newly elected and installed mayor of St. Paul, who testified regarding community experiences and concerns. And among the individuals and community people that testified, Patty O'Keefe, described as an ICE observer, who said she was held in ICE custody for 9 hours. I heard that testimony. It was gripping. And what she said, I think, was that where she was detained, there was a place that they took people that were U.S. citizens, separate from people that they questioned the citizenship status of. So that means there's a willfulness in this roundup that ICE is doing. And people, I think, mistakenly are saying, oh, I'm an American citizen, I have nothing to fear. Oh, brother, oh, sister, I think you do. You better wake up, because even though you think you are immune, it's just a question of time and opportunity before you get otherized.
That's right.
And turned into the adversary, and therefore they justify bringing their oppression to you personally. That's what I think. And a Somali American Minnesota resident also was taken into custody during his lunch break, despite being a U.S. citizen. I heard on the report today, I think I was listening to Don Lemon this morning, talking to a Minnesota advocate, person associated with the formerly associated with American Civil Liberties Union, and who's with the Justice Project in Minnesota. But they're saying that the Liberian person that was arrested by ICE was ordered to release that man from custody by 11 today. Whether that's happened, I don't know. If you are listening and on any of the channels here, Facebook or YouTube, and you have information, love to have your feedback, your input on the conversation. Dr. Oliver Williams, go ahead and respond to that initial statement. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I just think that ICE it's an intention to be able to intimidate people in communities. And it's his Trump's perspective in terms of what he wants to do to the society and to be a dictator. Sonia and I have a friend whose husband was picked up by ICE, and he disappeared to Montana. And then, my wife is Puerto Rican, and she has an accent. And so I think about her carrying a passport with her, if that will make a difference, to make sure that she is safe, because you're supposed to be. So with the woman that was shot and killed, it didn't matter whether you were a person of color or you weren't. Mm-hmm. But another thing is the fact that I've heard stories where ICE picked people up because they were a person of color, and or they may have had an accent. So
let me sit with that for a second, Dr. Oliver, because you mentioned this killing in South Minneapolis shows that ICE will kill white people too, and a white woman in this case. And why is it important to make that note? This is black man to black man, and I'm inviting you to witness this conversation, Debbie. When my wife and I were talking about, when we first heard of the shooting, I think I was actually either producing my newspaper at the time and talking to my designer or graphics person online. I told him about it, and I said, I don't know if the person's white or black, likely a black woman, because black women's lives and black lives are not valued here. So I'd be surprised if it was a white person, And so I was surprised that this white woman was killed by the police. When I saw the videos, it was horrific, And so that's a conversation that we have in our community. We always ask, when any crisis happens, I wonder if they were black. Why do we have that conversation? And what does it matter? One of the things that a congressperson said today was something to the effect of language that says, one of us, many of them. And that wasn't the exact words, but it had to do with when things happen in the society in large, whites see themselves as individuals. When it happens and involves a person of color or an other, it's all of them. And so that's been the rule applied to the Somalis, theoretically, or at some level. Trump is ginning up this idea that they've got to come and rescue Minnesota and the country from the invasion of Somalis who are draining the state by committing multi-billion-dollar fraud theft from the government and robbing Americans of our wealth by being here. And he's actually gone as far as telling Ilhan she should leave the country, that he doesn't want her here. That is absolutely unacceptable and crazy in my point of view. But it's consistent with the process of demonizing, if a white man does something, it's one white guy. Jeffrey Dahmer, one white guy. What's his name, who killed the kid in Florida? Just one white guy, right? Even the Unabomber or the New York, But if someone of color, Black in particular, that pain is attributed, or that incident is attributed to the nature, the character, and the presence of the entire class and race of people. What do you think, Dr. Oliver?
Well, as this thing came up, and I heard him talk about fraud and Somali community, and you had to get rid of all Somalis. I said, well, what if there was a person that had 34 felony counts, and then what you did was you ended up judging all white men based on that person?
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of friends that are white.
Mm-hmm.
One of my close friends is that when I came to Minnesota is a white man that we stay in contact, even though we're both old. We stay in contact with each other, and we've been friends for a while. One of my oldest friends is a Jewish man that I grew up with, and we met when we were 19.
Mm-hmm.
We're friends all these years. He was in my wedding, and I was in his wedding. And a white man that's been a good friend. So the thing that I think about is I don't judge everybody based on who Donald Trump is.
Mm-hmm.
So why would he look at the people that did bad things and then think that it applies to everybody? Mm-hmm. So if there are people that are doing bad things, deal with those bad people. But you don't paint everybody with the same brush.
Right.
So that's one thing I take offense of with him, in terms of how he deals with everybody. But the one reality for me is when you're dealing with a white Christian nationalist, white supremacist, he's doing what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the thing that's been interesting to me. It's not new for the Central Park Five that were found innocent, and he put ads in the paper about killing them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not unexpected. The question for me is why other people didn't take it seriously. And his behavior is the behavior of what you expect a person like him to do. But so that's a reaction that I have, and his intention to intimidate. I had a classmate when I was in high school, and so this young man, he's not young anymore. This old man contacted me. He saw something on Facebook. I don't know how it popped up in his feed or whatever, and he wanted to contact me, and he wanted to go fishing, take me fishing, and I had concerns about that. But then, because I remember the way it was when I was integrating that school, and it wasn't always very comfortable for me, and he wasn't always comfortable for me. But I gave it a shot. But then I found out that he was a Trumper, and he would make some comments about things, and then put it in my Facebook feed. And so I asked him about that. And so I said, man, you got to lose my number and lose my email, lose my Facebook. Don't be in contact with me, because when I ended up reflecting on my high school experiences, I said, well, maybe I was looking at that from the eyes of a young person. But then he validated it
Yeah.
after as we were adults and seniors, for the philosophy, but also validated what the experiences were. And that it made sense, because it made no sense back then. It doesn't make any sense now about what happened back then. But he validated my belief and experiences, the real challenges when I was going to school. And it was interesting that the middle school that my mom wanted me to go to, and then the high school that I went to, they didn't have us come into the school because they loved us or they had to change your heart, because they were trying to exclude you, before. They wanted you to come to the school because they were going to lose their funding if they didn't, have us come. So, so that's my reality with that, and all the things that Donald Trump is not different than he was before he was elected.
Mhm.
So why should we believe that he would do anything differently, other than that quote with regard to what happened in Germany,
Mhm.
where they said, they came for all these other people. I'm misquoting, but
Mhm.
I'm giving you the idea of the statement.
Mhm.
And I ignored them, but then they came for me, but there was nobody else to fight for.
Mhm.
And which is interesting to me, because I within the last 10 years, I used to go do things for the government and do things for the military and do training in different countries. So they sent me to Germany, to Weinheim, and then that to do training there. But I also lectured at Bad Lippensee and at the Lutheran University that's there. And I didn't realize that Lutherans used to have nuns, but we were in the Black Forest, and I had broken my ankle off my motorcycle, which we won't talk about, and I I had to do this lecture and teach for a week at this university. So I got there, and people couldn't have been nicer. I mean, there were a few people that could have been nicer, but you could tell that they were a bit resentful. But but most people were just wonderful and extended. And I had to take the train from the airport to Bad Lippensee, and it was fascinating to me. We got there. The students were wonderful. The faculty was wonderful. Um, they but strangers on the way were wonderful, and so what's interesting to me is that Germany has this belief system and ways that they confronted what Hitler had done, and that it's against the law to do the things that he was doing before. The other thing
So,
that
so what's that mean for us here now? What does that mean for? Because I think both you and Debbie talked about the parallels or the closeness or the proximity of the rhetoric and the incidences that happened in history in Germany in particular, and what's happening unfolding right now. It feels like it's the same thing.
well, I think you said it earlier, Al. This manifest destiny and this colonial perspective about how Trump and his ilk think about things. I think that they had the wisdom and the will to confront the isms that existed, but they had to come face to face with it. Then they developed laws to be able to respond to it. Now, it didn't touch everybody. I mean, I took Sam and Sonia to Germany on one of the trips that I had to do, and we went to a shop and they had these Harry Potter dolls, and so we were looking at them, and the shop owner was wrong, Let's say, let me just stop there, and the way that they dealt with things. So I bought the dial at another place and took it back and showed her that I bought the dial somewhere else. That was petty on my part, but we did it nonetheless. But most of the experiences that I had there were pretty wonderful.
Mhm.
So the answer to your question is, I think that they had the will to recognize something is wrong.
Mhm.
Taking care, erasing people's history is something that we've done in the United States for a long time. But what's interesting to me is that Donald Trump is a person that's not the most intelligent person in the world.
Mhm.
And he says that there is no history of people who come from diverse communities. But he's trying to erase what existed. Then he calls the DEI and we need to eliminate it. The logic doesn't make any sense. So what I appreciated about Germany was the fact that they were able to name it and confront it, and develop laws against it. And I think recognize when there was something that happened that was not right. We have to do that in the United States.
Mhm.
But historically, we haven't been willing to. That being said, there have been people who were willing to do things like that.
Mhm.
Joe Biden, for example, Al Gore
Mhm.
had done some things that I really appreciated.
Mhm.
And we had people who were in Congress historically. John Lewis,
Mhm.
a bunch of people. So we have to uphold those folks and not look at people who may want to say, well, it's me and let me support myself, because this man's got no loyalty to anyone.
Debbie,
And
what do you think? Let me have you close us out, Debbie, with your thoughts just on where we are and your role and responsibility as a human being, and also, connecting that to your training and your spiritual orientation. Where do we go from here? What do
Oh
you
gosh.
tell our neighbors?
A couple of things, Dr. Williams, I think you cannot forget history.
right.
I know people try, and they try in different ways by, I don't, what they're doing. I just don't think like you can't erase the past. It's not like it never happened. And if you tear it out of a book and don't teach it or don't express that information, but you don't have to repeat it. I don't think that it needs to be this way.
Right.
This isn't what's been happening in my city, in my state, is affecting everybody differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's affecting everybody differently, but it's affecting everybody. I want to just share something quick. I have a friend who happens to be Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
who posted on Facebook the quote by Anne Frank.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you've seen this quote: terrible things are happening outside. Helpless people are being dragged out of their homes. Families are torn apart. Men, women, and children are separated. Children come home from school to find that their parents have disappeared. Not one word in that statement has anything to do with race. It's what's happening to humanity, what happened to humanity. And this isn't okay. And sometimes I don't know what I can do, but it's not just me. It's figuring out how my role contributes to the whole. And maybe part of my role right now is when caregivers call and they're dealing with a lot of additional stress because of what's going on. Are there things that I can do for that situation? But this is not me anymore. I never was, frankly. It's my city, it's my state, it's my neighbors, it's my community. It's people that I know personally, professionally, otherwise. It's not an isolated experience anymore. And it's terrifying.
Listen, Debbie Richman, thank you so much, Dr. Oliver. It's always great to be in company with you. I'm Al McFarlane. This has been an extended edition of the Healing Circle, the conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll be focusing, I think, in the weeks ahead. We may do more live streams daily, not only at the 1 o'clock hour, but at different hours as we monitor what's going on, both here in the city and even around the world. We'd love to have your involvement, your participation, your feedback in our comment section. If you want to join the conversation anytime this week, just drop us a note. I can be reached. Here's an easy email for me. It's al@insightnews.com. So send me a note if you want to connect and be in and on a conversation. Love to have you. Meantime, you guys have a great weekend, and enjoy, and let's stay positive. Let's not get overwhelmed, and let's keep believing that we are the change we've been looking for. With that, thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right. And my producer had to leave, so I'm going to try to do the outro myself here. And let's see if I learn how to do it. Nope. And I don't know that I did it. Well, I'm going to just close it by saying goodbye and thank you all. We'll see you next time. Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.